Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, we'll be talking about safety concerns related to the most widely used agricultural chemical in the world. Stand by for a debate about a very popular weed killer. That debate is very much online as well, Malika, our digital producer.
It all involves a chemical that's called glyphosate. It has its supporters and it has its detractors. So here's a little taste of that debate. This is Kevin on one side, who says glyphosate is a GMO boogeyman, or a genetically modified organism boogeyman. Most concerns are overblown and or based in bad science and misinformation. On the other side of the debate is Kellen, who says this chemical, it's not natural, it's not ingestible, and it's toxic in concentrated amounts. It sacrifices environmental health to sustain an unsustainable aesthetic. So you see where our community is coming from. We want to know where you're coming from, so tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
Hello, my name is Rella Abernathy, 15-year-old Indigenous activist, and I'm in the stream.
RoundUp weed killer is the most widely used herbicide in the world. It has been called safe by the US and European government regulators since the 1970s. But in the last decade, farmers around the world have raised concerns that it might also be making them sick. The active chemical in RoundUp is called glyphosate, and a study released by scientists in the US last week found traces of it in foods it hadn't even been sprayed on. And the European Union this week voted to increase monitoring of its use. Belgium has banned glyphosate entirely. So joining us to talk about this issue, we have Donna Farmer, a scientist who works for Monsanto at their headquarters in the city of St. Louis, Missouri. In Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, Bill Freese is a policy analyst for the Center for Food Safety. Dave Walton is a farmer in Iowa, and Rella Abernathy is in charge of pest management for the city of Boulder, Colorado. Good to have you all on board, guests. We start with our community and Malika.
The debate's raging. Is this safe? That's the thing everyone wants to know. So here is a community comment we got via video from Reverend Billy on some skepticism around RoundUp. Have a listen.
Washington is becoming isolated. There's so many countries around the world that have banned Monsanto's RoundUp and glyphosates. I believe that many of the people who work in the FDA and the EPA and in the administration are now coming to believe that this company, Monsanto, with its history of Agent Orange and bovine growth hormones and PCBs and so forth, that they are hiding something.
So Donna, you heard what he had to say. Is it safe? What do you think?
Yes, glyphosate is absolutely safe, and the RoundUp branded products that are developed from them are safe to use as intended. Regulatory agencies around the world have approved it over the past 40 years. Recently, Japan, the European Union, the US EPA in 2013, as well as Canada have all said that glyphosate is not a carcinogen and poses no unreasonable risk to human health or the environment when used according to label directions.
See, Rella, in Boulder, Colorado, you actually don't use RoundUp anymore, this weed killer that we're talking about. Why not?
Well, the city of Boulder has a philosophy of looking at the entire ecosystem, and we try to enhance and protect biodiversity and ecosystem health. A lot of people are looking at the pest in a very focused way, and then wanting to go in and take out the pest without looking at the entire web of life and all the moving parts within the ecosystem.
Right.
So we believe that we can keep things better in balance, better in check, without reaching for a bottle first thing and trying to use the natural pest controls that are out there, like natural enemies. For insects, there's also insects that feed on weeds, and putting in the proper plants and making sure that everything is put in place to prevent the pest issues from ever occurring in the first place.
Donna?
But Rella, you actually used a glyphosate-based product when you had a really significant invasive species that you needed to control. And I think people need to understand whether things are synthetically made or natural, they all have the potential to be toxic. So, you know, like if you're using a herbicidal agricultural, what do you call it, the herbicide, I'm sorry, pardon me, when you're using the herbal like sorry about this. When you're using the vinegar, the horticultural vinegars, they also have toxic side effects. Some other things beyond pesticides that have been promoted to controlling weeds are flames and hot water. And all of those things have the potential to harm non-targets and also to be harmful to humans.
So let me show you something. Go ahead. Yeah, please do. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think there's like you say, every kind of input that you put into a system is going to have pros and cons. You bring up the idea of vinegar, horticultural vinegar, which a lot of pest management folks find difficult to use because if you get it in your eye, obviously you can be blinded, so that may not be the best choice. Yeah. But I think on the converse, and we're talking, that's called acute toxicity. So when you use a product right now, you have an effect. You may die, you may have a rash or a burn or something. But when we're talking about products like glyphosate, people like to talk about the acute toxicity and say, well, if I'm exposed to it, I'm not going to die right now. But that's like if you say, well, if I smoke one cigarette or use chewing tobacco, I may not die right now. But if I use it chronically and I'm exposed to it for many years over and over again, I risk having health effects from that. I think we all understand that.
All right.
And what all of us are saying.
Take a pause.
No,
we've got to cut. So take a pause. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'd just like to correct a misconception here. The regulators, including the EPA and European regulators, they do not rule when they approve a pesticide that it's safe, all right? The standard is, it's a risk-benefit standard. They say there's not unreasonable adverse effects. And what that means is that pesticides that do cause harmful effects, both to human beings and the environment, can be approved. If the supposed economic benefit outweighs the risks. So, this is a very important distinction, and we've seen many.
That's really important. So is it possible that we can have products on the market right now that farmers are using that are actually dangerous? But, but they do so much good for the crops that it's okay.
Well, that's why I say
they are not dangerous when they are used according to label directions. The regulatory agencies take that into consideration for short-term, long-term studies.
That's a very common myth.
Pardon?
We have right now an insecticide.
It is not a common myth. Absolutely not a common myth.
Has known to drift large distances and has been implicated in reducing the IQ of children who are exposed to it in the womb of pregnant women.
How's that possible, Bill?
Absolutely not.
It is incredible that the EPA has approved
science to support your opinion. That is not a sound science.
All right, Donna and Bill, hold tight for a moment, because I need to unpack this. What you're saying is incredibly serious, Bill. What's your source? What's your evidence?
Oh, well, the EPA has finally began to look at the evidence and has proposed to ban this insecticide based on several very high quality.
First of all, glyphosate's not an insecticide, it's an herbicide.
Yes, I know. I'm talking about chlorpyrifos to make the point that EPA approves hazardous products. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Now with EPA,
that was an example. We're not necessarily talking about RoundUp. All right, Bill, take a moment for a minute, because we've got more people in this debate and they're online. Malika, help us get to them.
Right. So here's two of them. This is Ginny, and she says anti-glyphosate rhetoric tends to be not just wrong, but also self-centered and privileged. She goes on to say that farm workers are rarely mentioned. So we actually reached out to farm workers, some of them in our own community. This is Philip, who says he watches the stream all the time. He writes in, as a farmer, I often think the media sensationalizes farm chemicals, like the one we're talking about today, even though it helps feed many people. Dave, can you relate to his comments? What's your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the earlier comment about the alternatives is a very important one. We use RoundUp in our operation in a targeted way. We use it for an application to clear fields of weeds before planting in what's called a burn down application. The alternative is a product called Gramoxone. It might also be known as Paraquat. That has a toxicity of 10 times higher than glyphosate. We're not allowed to use glyphosate.
So when you say that, what does that mean for us, for those of us who are not farmers? What does that extra toxicity mean? Does it give you headaches? Do you get cancer? Do you break out in boils? What's the difference? He's laughing at me. You can tell I haven't farmed much.
I can address that.
What's the difference? Yeah, Donna.
I look at it in terms of LD50, which that means it's a lethal dose for 50% of the population.
Oh, okay.
This is known as acute toxicity, and it's based on tests in laboratory animals. It's also misleading to suggest that there's only one alternative to glyphosate. There are actually hundreds of herbicides, and more importantly, organic agriculture has developed very effective methods to suppress weeds that don't involve chemicals. These are cultural techniques, such as growing cover crops in the off-season.
No, those are chemicals.
Yes, it's very true, and farmers are starting to go back
like
to
everybody else.
Could you please let me speak, Donna? I didn't interrupt you when you spoke, okay? So yeah, there are definitely ways to suppress weeds effectively without using chemicals or only using them as a last resort. We're not for banning all pesticides, but we feel, just as Rella said, that there's too often this attitude of going straight to the chemical to try to eradicate the pest, whether it's an insect or a weed, when really what needs to happen is they need to be managed, reduced to levels that don't cause problems. And so the idea is first use cultural techniques like cover crops, as I mentioned, and only then, if really necessary, then you turn to the chemicals. Yeah. And, then we would use them much more sparingly, and they wouldn't have the health environmental impacts that we have.
Bill, hold on tight. Dave, what do you want to say?
Yeah, if we use cover crops, which we do in parts of our operation, how are we going to terminate those cover crops without herbicides?
And I just say, a cover crop does what, Dave? What's a cover crop do?
A cover crop covers the soil when there isn't a crop growing.
Okay.
And also, there's some benefits to the soil, organic matter in the soil structure as well. One of the benefits is weed suppression.
Very good. All right,
yeah, and crops can be grown without using chemicals to burn them down. There's actually organic methods. They use something called a roller crimper, where a device is rolled over the cover crop to smash it down into a mat, which then helps suppress weeds in the following crop. There's research here.
That works on rye, but that's only one type of cover crop. A roller won't kill a crimson clover, for example, or a tillage radish. They'll just pop back up.
So Bill and Dave, for the non-farmers in our community, and there are a few, I just want to push this on just a little bit because there's some criticism that we're getting, and so I want to bring this up. This is Pepe. This is a tweet that I'll direct to you, Donna. Pepe says, "Why should we take your word over the findings of the World Health Organization?" And what they're referencing is the WHO's source for information about cancer, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, of course, that you heard at the top of this show. So along with that pushback, we also got a video comment from someone who's studied this, who wrote an article about this. You can see that article here on my screen for The Intercept. The headline, EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency here in the US, used Monsanto's research to give Roundup a pass. So here's what she had to say. Have a listen.
When I wrote a piece about glyphosate and endocrine disruption that is linked to on the Al Jazeera website, the scientists that I spoke with who contacted me afterwards and who I spoke to during the piece, reporting of the piece, all lamented the fact that they couldn't see the original data that Monsanto had submitted to the EPA. Can you make that public?
So she's asking for information. Would that help?
Okay. Well, two things. First, the one about the WHO, the World Health Organization, there are actually 3 programs besides IARC that have looked at all of the studies that IARC looked at and more, and they came to a very different conclusion. Those 3 programs decided that glyphosate was not carcinogenic, as have regulatory agencies. It is interesting, isn't it? Over the past 40 years, other WHO programs, as well as regulatory agencies all over the world, have evaluated glyphosate, and the only one to ever come out and declare it a carcinogen is IARC, but that's what IARC does. They declare things carcinogens. Yeah. Now, regarding EPA...
Excuse me, IARC is the world's leading authority on carcinogenicity.
And IARC is the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So,
yes, excuse me.
Yeah, no worries, just so everyone's on the same page.
This is the latest word from medical science on glyphosate, okay? And they don't
let's talk about what
economic benefits like the regulators do. So, I mean, this is truly medical science. And 94 scientists...
Bill said there's a probability that glyphosate is... So, Bill, can I hold tight for a moment, and Donna as well. Let me just because this is a conversation. You have all of the time, and we're joining this. So, the International Agency for Research on Cancer said there's a possibility that glyphosate might be carcinogenic. Might cause cancer.
Probability. Yes.
That doesn't mean that there's a definite link. If it's been used since the 1970s, could it be all these years later cancerous? Could it cause cancer all these years later?
Can I input something
about what the IARC does?
Yeah, let me just bring in Rella, because
IARC.
let me bring in Rella, because we haven't heard more from her. Go ahead, Rella.
I just like to, to chime in on what it means when an organization, like as Bill said, the leading authority in the world on evaluating the potential for a compound to cause cancer risk. Let's take a good example of tobacco, for instance, which, 50 years after the studies began is finally being admitted to having the potential to cause cancer. I think we can all agree on that. But the majority of people who smoke, let's say 95%, never get lung cancer. So just because even something that is classified as a carcinogen, the next level up higher than what glyphosate is categorized as a probable carcinogen, it doesn't mean everybody who uses it is going to develop a cancer, but it means that the risk is elevated. And when we look at the exposure that everybody has all over the world to this product, it's in everyone's urine, it's in our food, and the people who apply it are have the highest exposure of anyone. It's worth us asking these questions and not just brushing it off and saying that the world's leading cancer authority should be questioned when their process is well known, has been vetted by epidemiologists all over the world, and is known to be a solid process.
Yeah, and Dave, you should be concerned as well, because there are 3 strong epidemiology studies which show that farmers who are exposed to glyphosate have a higher incidence of a very serious cancer known as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's an immune system cancer, and this is, a cancer that farmers are known to get more than the general
Bill,
population.
let's just check to see if Dave's
so
worried.
the glyphosate is very significant.
Dave, are you worried about your health?
I am not at all concerned by it. No.
Are you worried about the people who consume your produce's health?
I am, and we sell a fair amount of product direct to consumers. We sell beef and lamb and sweet corn directly to consumers. So it is their safety is foremost in my mind. I feed my family and my friends from what we grow on the farm, and I would not for one moment take a risk of giving something that was unhealthy. I would not. And I've looked at this. I've looked at it in a number of different ways. I was an animal science major, so I understand science and how it's done. And I've looked at the studies, and I am not at all concerned.
I want to jump in, and I'm going to actually go to you with this, Donna, but I want to show you all something. Donna, I want to go to you with this also because one of the video comments I played a little bit earlier didn't get an answer, and so I'm going to play you another video comment with a similar question to see if we can get an answer. So this is something I pulled up on my laptop. This is shared with us at the stream. Do you live near Monsanto's RoundUp? And it is a map using publicly available data for everyone to see, put out by someone named Reverend Billy. You heard him a little bit earlier. He'll explain what this map really is in this video comment he sent us. Have a listen.
Well, the Church of Stop Shopping is making a national map of all the cities and towns approaching people with Freedom of Information Act requests. School administrations, parks departments, city regulators. We believe that once people have the information in their hands, and they're looking right at it, and they're getting that playgrounds, picnic areas, what's the distance to the spraying event of the glyphosates from their home or the route their children take to go to school. Once that information is in hand, we believe that people will act.
So Donna, similar to the other video commenter's question, can you make that data publicly available?
Well, let me just go back to IARC for a minute. That's what IARC does. In over 1,000 things that they've looked at, all but one has been declared a carcinogen. And to put this into perspective, and let's leave the science of how they did their evaluation out of it. If you go and you look at, say, the Mother's Day brunch that is coming up, bacon, sausages, your mimosas, your Bloody Marys, they're all considered a known human carcinogen. Your coffee and your hot drinks are known as possible carcinogens. Your cell phone is known as a possible carcinogen. So that's
Donna,
what IARC does. I don't hear people banning meat.
So Donna, I hear that. And Bill, stand down for a moment. Let's see if we can get to this. You have done research. This is part of your job to make sure that your products are actually safe. Would you ever make that research available so people can also have a look at it? That was the direct question. What's the direct answer?
Well, let's go back and see what she's talking about, because they did get the studies, and there is a weight of evidence document.
So you're saying
about the endocrine
so you're saying that you won't make it public, but they were able to look at your work, and that's all right. Let me show you something here, because we've been talking about this Roundup weed killer, and if you look online, it will tell you what it actually does. Have a look.
Glyphosate is applied to weeds. Once absorbed, it travels to the roots, where it blocks a specific enzyme found in plants, not animals or humans. Without that enzyme, the weed can't make the building blocks it needs to grow. The entire weed withers to the ground, where any remaining glyphosate is broken down in the soil into naturally occurring substances like carbon dioxide and phosphate.
What I found fascinating, Bill, was, and I didn't know this, is how they discovered that this weed killer actually kills weeds. Can you take us back to the origin of how it ended up being Roundup? Because that is really interesting. What was it first? It wasn't designed as a weed killer.
It was originally patented as a chelator, but I think the important thing is that, that ad you just showed had some claims in it that the New York State Attorney General came down on Monsanto in 1996, and Monsanto was claiming in ads that glyphosate is safe and harmless and practically non-toxic and even good for the environment. And the New York State Attorney General said, no, this is false advertising, and made Monsanto stop doing that. So I think that, the myth of glyphosate safety, and, I believe Dave's sincerity when he believes in it, has been created through false messaging that the company has put out there. And, objective bodies have found these claims to be false. It's true in France, too. France's highest court.
What objective bodies?
The New York State Attorneys General and the French Supreme Court have found Monsanto's claims about glyphosate to be false and deceptive advertising, and
first of all, the one in New York was a disagreement.
So, excuse me, let me just finish. And so the whole idea that glyphosate is, supposedly safe is really more a result of, very strong and clever marketing by Monsanto and not on science. And that's why IARC's determination is so important, because finally we're seeing what medical scientists really think. And again, 94 scientists co-wrote an article supporting IARC's determination that glyphosate is probably carcinogenic.
Goodness
to people.
me.
All right?
If I was watching this at home, or wherever I was watching this, I'd be like, what should I decide? Is it safe? Is it not safe? It's been a really, really, really robust conversation. Hold tight, guests, all for a moment, because I'm going to go back to the community. And Malika.
Well, I will give you two answers from two different farmers.
Yes.
This is David, who says, in my small Vermont community, more and more farms are becoming organic and more diverse, feeding into the slow food movement. On the other hand, you have Philip, a farmer, who says, glyphosate is still important to my farm, but I grow non-GMO crops too, along with GMO corn. So I don't know, it's the future.
All right, this conversation will continue online. Donna Farmer is from Monsanto. She is a scientist there. Dave Walton is an Iowa farmer who feels very comfortable with using Roundup. Hearing from the contrary point of view, we have Bill Freese. He's a food policy analyst, and also Rella Abernathy. She manages pest control for the city of Boulder, Colorado. Where do you fall on this debate? We're taking online at #AJStream. Thank you, guests, for a really, really, really interesting debate. Really appreciate your time on the stream today. And now, let's talk a little bit about next week. Next week, the stream will be 5 years old. So we are going to be marking our 5th anniversary all the way through the week. So on Monday, this has never been done before, Malika.
Never.
All of the regular hosts are coming back. Do you remember Derek and Imran and Ahmed? And Lisa Fletcher? They're all going to be back on one show. On Tuesday, some of our favourite guests from over the 5 years. Malika?
And on Wednesday, we'll be talking about some of the most impactful shows pitched by our community, those people behind Finland.
Yes, we love
And on
you.
Thursday, we're joined by your favorite AJ correspondents on stories they've been following.
Oh my goodness, we're exhausted planning this anniversary. Do join us for Stream's 5th anniversary next week on Al Jazeera. Until then, take care.